All right, y'all. What's up? What's up? I'm hoping that I may have this is my first. I think it's my first time going live with the 20-pound sledge channel for Facebook, and I hope a few folks will tune in. Fellow musicians, or as well as folks who dig on 20-pound sledge, because I'm just kind of sharing with y'all my little journal, or my journey going into finishing up the mix for the next album. And I think one of the questions, I'm talking to those particularly, who do rock and stuff like that. I think one of the biggest questions that are out there is like, when people are trying to, mix, trying to do a, self-published thing, it's like, how do I get that size, man? How do I get the volume? How do I get the size? How do I get the depth, the clarity? These because when scenes where we're trying to do rock, everything just gets flattened out, squeezed together. It's like, man, my mixes, they sound so flat. And, so I feel you, man. I get it. And, I think, what I want to start with is, and just to let you guys know, I'm not an expert, right? I'm just a do-it-yourselfer, layman. I have a layman approach to doing this. And but I'm just gonna try to tell you like the things that I'm learning. I'm learning as I go, and hopefully this album will be even better sonically as the Divine Battery album. And if I don't mind saying so myself, the music is pretty, it's pretty fly. But maybe I wish I could have done a lot better on the mix. But I still think the music comes across. But in trying to get to achieve these sounds that we want to get for your album, and hopefully you'll do better with what I'm suggesting than I will. I guess the first thing I want to go with is a high pass filter is your friend. I know a lot of folks don't want to hear this. A high pass, dang man, I don't want to cut out the meat, man. It's like you gonna have to cut out the meat. Think of it like this. Here's my analogy for you. Well, before I say that, it's like, you want each instrument, it's like you want whether it's your vocals, whether it's your guitars, or your drums, your bass, or whichever, you want it to sound big, right? It's like right out the gate, you want it to sound like big and beepy and have all this density, and just take up the space. When you're listening to your speaker and you're hearing that bass guitar come through, you want the full circle of that speaker to be occupied, right, by that bass guitar. And the same thing with the guitars and with the drums. You want it to take up the space. So when you're listening to each individual instrument and you're trying to dial them in, you're wanting you want that guitar, it's like you want or the vocals. You want the vocals to sound like a DJ. Like on the radio, like when you hear the DJs coming through, their voice sounds all big and suave and smooth and stuff like that. Yeah, get ready for this next song. You want your vocals to sound like that, okay? And I totally understand. Here's the thing: when a DJ is speaking and it's just him, of course, in order to keep the audience's interest, yeah, you're gonna have to have the DJ, give him those nice bass frequencies and those mid-tones so you can hear the clarity in his voice. You're going to want that in order to make his voice sound interesting, because he's not sharing the space with anybody else. It's just the DJ. All right. But when you're going to share the space with somebody else, you're going to have to make some sacrifices. Right. So think of it like this. This is your canvas, right? You got your space that you're going to make your music in. All right. Now, you want to occupy that whole space as you do each instrument. You want your guitars to sound like nice, big, and full. It's like, no. What you're going to have to do is you're going to have to create spaces within spaces. So within this canvas, right, or within this space that you have, I don't want to say canvas because, we want to make this three-dimensional. We want it to sound like, it's got size and depth. All right. But within this cube, so to speak, you're going to have to make other cubes. And you're going to have to take a smaller cube and make your guitars sound awesome in that cube. Okay? So what you're gonna have to do is it's like when you strum out your guitar and you listen to the playback on it, you're gonna hear you'll start to hear like if you really listen to it, it's like when your guitar sounds nice, big, and full. Okay, those are those bass frequencies that are coming through. You're gonna have to cut those, right? Drop those out. It's kind of good to maybe like use a channel EQ, so you can kind of, just do a sweep and just drop it out, like maybe, like even if it's as low as like 500, and just drop those down, and where you can still hear the body of the guitar. You want to hear the resonance of your guitar and stuff like that, but you don't want to have these bass frequencies from the guitar that's going to create like a vacuum. All right, it's going to be like a vacuum effect, and it's going to have like this effect where we want to look at it. It's going to either suck everything up or it's going to push everything out to where everything is like fighting for space. All right, so your guitars, you're going to have to like drop that down to where you can still hear the resonance, you know, the richness of the guitar, but not this intrusive bass frequency of the guitars. Same thing with the vocals. You got to do the same thing with the vocals. Let the guitars and the vocals, even if it's rock, they have to have, excuse me, this treble melody attribute to them. Let them do that. That's their job. All right. And then with your bass guitars, that's where you want to go ahead and let that bottom, you know, let bass be bass, let drums be drums, right? So you're gonna have your bass guitars, have like enough frequencies where you can get the transparency, where it's kind of like, you know, pushing up the middle, but it's not fighting for space. So once again, you're making these cubes, all right? So it's like, here's your cube right here that you want to create your song in, and then you're going to make these cubes within cubes. Get your guitar sounding nice and good in that cube, in its space, right? So you have to cut out some of them bass frequencies, and let that guitar, let those harmonics come out, because sometimes even those bass frequencies will suck up the harmonics that you would have, that the guitar is really trying to, really want to say to its listener. All right, so have it sounding good in that space, boom, then you got it right here, and then you do your panning and stuff like that. All right, so but you're like, man, you're not satisfied because, man, it doesn't sound like nice and big, and I want to say, be patient. Hey, same thing, with your secondary guitar. If you're gonna have that, pan them left to right and have them sounding good in its space, in its cube. Don't try to take the whole space with it. Give it its space, right? Same thing with the vocals. Trim the fat on it. You're gonna get your fat back. Trust me, you're gonna get your fat back, but you gotta trim the fat on it. All right. And then have it sounding good in its cube, in its space, all right? Drums, when you're doing your overheads and stuff like that, you might want to dial the bass back. That way, when you have your primary, when you have your kick, let your bass come through with the kick. That way, they're not stepping on each other and stuff like that. Let the cymbals and the overheads in the room do its thing. But you're going to have to cut some of the bass on that, all right? I'm just suggesting, okay? Snares and stuff like that, have your primary snare. If you want to give it some depth, you want to give it some body, maybe trim a little bit of the bass out of it. That way the bass frequencies aren't phasing with each other, with the other toms and stuff like that. All right. So you're going to have that way you have your overheads doing its thing. Let it do the room. You don't want to give the room a bunch of bass. You're going to suck up your mix, right? It's going to create a vacuum. All right. So I'm just suggesting that you don't have like a whole bunch of bass in your room mix, in your overhead mix. Trim that out. Right? So you have some space. So you have a chance for the music to escape, right? It comes out in front. Same thing with the snares. Let the primary snare, do its punch, have a little bit of bass in it so it has some body to it, and then the high end so it has some slap, some strike to it. Same thing with the kick. Now that you've given each cube, its treatment, now, once you have all the cubes in place, and you should start low, y'all. Start low. No yellow. When you're doing your meter shouldn't really peak into the yellow when you're mixing everything, right? So you got some overhead, but be careful you don't bring it down so low that you're bringing up the noise floor, right? Because then you're gonna get some room noise, or even just recording noise into your mix. You don't want any of that. Okay, now that you've gotten everything, then that's when you can go ahead. If you want to do a little bit of EQ, that's when you bring the bass. Now you can go ahead and inflate everything. Everything is in its space, right? It's in here in this cube right here. Now, when you go ahead and want to do your compression and your EQ and stuff like that, now they inflate. But they have these boundaries, they have these borders where they don't get in each other's space and start bleeding over and start to make your mix sound lifeless and flat and, just you're not hearing everything. You can't really appreciate all the nuances that you've done in there. So anyway, that's the journey that I've got, that I'm on, with making the next 20 Pound Sledge album. I hope y'all have enjoyed, Divine Battery musically. Like I said, I wish I would have known the things that I know now, when I mixed it then. I still think, it's a pretty good sounding album, if I do say so myself, with all humility. But mixing wise and mastering, it's like, man, I wish I would have known this stuff, right? So hopefully you found that useful, and I hope when you hear the next 20 Pound Sledge album, it'll be an enjoyable experience for your playlist. And at any rate, thank you for letting me share what I have learned with you. I hope it was useful for you. I hope it made sense, and hope it makes your mixes and your renderings that much better. Right on. Godspeed and sledge on.